Hey everyone, this is Rob here from Phantom Trading, and in today's video we are going to be discussing my daily routine, my morning process checklist, whatever you want to call it. Now, obviously, this video is really for anybody that trades. If you're in the UK and you trade only New York session, it's not so much of a morning routine or anything. And if you're in Asia and you trade New York or London, like either you're starting in the afternoon or you're starting to trade at night, right? So that being said, this video is still applicable to you because anybody can trade at any time. It's still good to have this process in place, I think. And the reason I think it's important to have it, honestly, is because without it, right, we can sometimes come to the charts unprepared, number one, or even tilted from the previous day because maybe we took like a string of losses or something, right? So I think it's super important to have a daily process checklist in place where you have some core habits that you kind of follow. In my case, what's really, I think, the most important for my trading is my pre-session routine. I'm going to cover everything that's in this list from top to bottom. But again, the reason I think it's important is because you want to basically prep yourself to get into an optimal state to trade. And by following, a set list of processes that, aid your ability to do that, to get into that state, that mental state and emotional state, obviously it's going to affect your trading in a positive way, right? Now, there are some people that maybe naturally they're really good at getting to that state. They don't need to follow all these, strict regimens and stuff. You have to find what works for you, right? At least for me, I personally like it. I find like meditating before session and stuff is it just helps me get a clearer picture of what I think the market is going to do, and it helps me remove the biases that I may have from like the day before, as well as like tilt if I've taken like a string of losses, as I mentioned, right? So number one is waking up at 6 a.m. consistently. But really, to be able to do that, you have to go to bed on time. And so it really starts with being in bed at 10 p.m. sharp. And again, this is what works for me. If you trade a different session, may not be applicable to you. But regardless, I think sleeping a full 8 hours is really important, right? At minimum, I think you should be sleeping 7 hours, if not 9, maybe if your body needs it, right? Because when we sleep, not only do we, physically kind of recuperate, but our brains also go into a mode where they essentially organize everything that we kind of experience from the day, right? So it's a way to recharge your brain. And I'm not a doctor or anything, but I've heard that sleeping anything less than 6 or 7 hours a night, it's not healthy for you. I mean, people who do that, I think they've run studies and stuff, and they're more predisposed to get things like heart disease and cancer, right? So for the sake of like your own health, if you're one of those people that thinks you can sleep 5 hours and get away with it, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't do it. I used to trade London session and not sleep enough, and it really had an impact on my physical and mental health. So I kind of speak from experience, and it is just one anecdote, but obviously I think there were studies that were conducted that kind of proved that humans need their 8 hours of sleep. It's extremely rare that somebody with like a genetic mutation, for whatever reason, they just don't need that many hours of sleep, but it's so rare, right? So number one for me is like getting enough sleep. The other reason you want to sleep well is because you need to have energy to be able to trade, right? And to be able to study and retain any information that you kind of collected out throughout the day, right? So that's number one for me. Number two is taking a cold shower. The reason I do that is just to wake myself up. I don't always take a cold shower, but I'll do it because I'm typically pretty sleepy in the morning. Not a morning person. I have no shame in admitting that, but it's how I kind of force myself to be. Next is I will make myself a coffee or have a green smoothie. The reason I do this, again, is just for me, it's a pick-me-up. I actually like the taste of coffee as well, so that's why I make myself like an espresso or something. But I know some people don't drink coffee. You could have tea or whatever, or water. The point is, with having a green smoothie too, is because obviously it's pretty healthy for you. It's a little bit of like fuel for your brain, right? I don't want to be sitting there making a big breakfast early in the morning. I find that if I have a big breakfast, I usually get kind of sleepy from it. So there's a reason I don't do that. I don't really intermittent fast, but in a way, I'm not eating a ton in the morning. And obviously having a green smoothie, in my case, again, it could be water for you. I think you should drink water in the morning because obviously you get dehydrated as you sleep, right, throughout the night, just by breathing, right? Your breath contains moisture in it, right? So I don't know if you ever like blown or like breathed up against a piece of glass, how it fogs up. I mean, you're essentially getting dehydrated as you sleep. So it's important to drink water, right? Get yourself all good to go. Next one, which is the most important one on this list, is meditating before turning my computer on. And the reason that I do that is because it helps me get into that really good mental state, right? Where kind of calm myself down a little bit. Maybe, I had a bad day previously, but like, doesn't matter, right? So the point of meditating is really to just reset myself mentally and emotionally. And the other thing that I like to do as well when I'm meditating is I'll actually do like a mental rehearsal of how I'm going to trade for that session. So it sounds kind of weird, but what I'll do is I'll picture myself doing my entire process from that point on the list down, right? So reviewing my previous end of day analysis, all the other stuff that I'm about to mention, right? And obviously up until the point where I'm doing a full analysis, and then I'm picturing myself at my desk in first person, doing my analysis, finding a high probability trade setup that fits within my plan, and then being patient, and then finally executing it and profiting off of it. So it's again just to get myself primed and ready, my subconscious ready essentially, right, to actually take those actions rather than hesitate or go in and overtrade, right? Because they're both things that traders who are learning how to trade commonly do. It's something that I've done in the past too, right? So that's a super important one. Meditating, again, it's not easy to build the habit of meditating, but there's plenty of apps that you can use. Even just a 10-minute meditation, I think, in the morning is a great way to reset yourself, or before your session. No matter what session you trade or what time you're trading, try meditating before and see how it affects your ability to get into a better state of mind for trading, right? So next for me is reviewing my previous day, end of day analysis. So I'll leave my markups from the day before on my charts, and I'll just kind of bar replay through it and see what happened the previous day to get an idea. At which point I'll actually delete all of the markups, because I always want to do fresh markups. So I'll talk about that in a second. And the other thing that I'm going to do is I have a paper journal, which I've mentioned in another video in how to journal trades, where I actually document all of my emotions that I'm feeling, throughout the day, before I take a trade, while I'm in it, after session, all of it, right? And the reason that I input that into a little entry in my Notion is because what I think most people do with a journal is they'll just write in it and kind of never look at it again. They'll throw it away, right? Well, they don't throw the journal away, but they don't look at it again. They don't review it, right? And I think it's super important to review kind of what you were going through the day before and reflect on it. So it doesn't take a lot of time to do it. I'll type up pretty much exactly what I wrote. The only thing that I change is obviously I'm writing in the present tense in the journal when I'm writing it. The only thing that I change is I put it in the past tense. So I'm like, in my paper journal, I was feeling, very confident today. The only difference is I'll write it down in my Notion as, I was feeling very confident yesterday. So small change, right? And then last but not least, in the pre-session checklist is my fight or flight check. Am I mentally fit to trade today? So this is a very important one. The reason I ask myself this is because sometimes I'll come to, the trading desk and maybe I didn't sleep enough. Maybe I only slept 4 hours or something, right? There's no way I'm going to trade like that. It just doesn't make sense to do it. I increase the risk of making a mistake in things like my analysis and execution. It's not worth it to me, right? The name of the game is capital preservation number one. And if I'm tired, or maybe something is stressing me out, external to trading, or again, maybe I've taken a string of losses and it's affecting my ability to trade, maybe I really do need a break, I'm going to take that break. I'm not going to force myself to trade. And I think that's something that every trader should ask themselves, because again, trading is a huge mental game too, right? It's really like, in a way, it can be a fight against yourself in certain moments. In another sense, you can be your best friend, right? Because you're trading really well and you're following your plan and sticking to the processes. So next, if I am fit to trade mentally, I check that one off. Next one on my list is my high impact news check. And this one's super important too, right? A lot of us trade prop fund accounts. It depends on what account that you trade, what firm that you're with, but a lot of them will restrict high impact news events. And aside from that, the reason that I check for high impact news, just using one of the many online tools that you can use to check for high impact economic news, is because you can get slipped, right? And I've been slipped before. I've taken a negative 6R trade, and it was pretty painful, right? It's because I traded CPI, not realizing that CPI release was going to happen right then and there, New York session. One of my friends actually took like a negative 13R trade because of it. So imagine you're like trading in an FTMO or something, or an MFF account, or even an E8 account, and you take negative 13 percent, right? If you're risking 1%, like you're losing the account, right? Regardless of the fact that like you're trading a restricted news event in the case of FTMO, right? That would suck, right? And it's happened to people. We've seen it in the phantom trading community. It's not a mistake that you want to make. It's not a lesson that you want to learn the hard way. Like, trust me, it's not nice. So that's an absolute must for me. The next one is eliminating and minimizing distractions as much as possible. So for me, and I think for a lot of people, it's pretty easy to get distracted if you're on a computer. You may have YouTube open from the day before. Just close it. Like, do what you can to minimize distractions. Delete Instagram off your phone. You don't need social media while you're trading. It's a huge distraction. I would not have a TV on I wouldn't be watching a show on my computer while I'm trading either. I don't think that's a good way to do it. Don't be like me, what I used to do, because I was trading London and trying to stay up. Remember, I'm in North America, so I'm in the Eastern Standard Time Zone. Trading London's 3 a.m. for me, right? So what I used to do is I would stay up and play video games to try and like stay up and trade. Right? I would use alerts. Problem is, and it's funny because me and Dan used to play games. We would play like a multiplayer game. You can't pause a multiplayer game. It didn't work, right? And even then, I would play a single player game. I would play like Resident Evil 2, the remake. Really great game. I highly recommend. 10 out of 10 game. But what would happen? I'd be playing it. I'd be distracted. I'm not paying attention to the charts, right? So obviously don't do that. I think the most you can do is maybe read a book on like trade psychology or trading. That's what I do now. And, it keeps me it gives me enough attention that I can actually pay attention to the markets. I still use alerts. I don't stare at the 1 minute necessarily, right? But I'm not distracted so much that I'm really not paying attention and I miss moves, right? Because that's what happened when, I would play video games, for example. The other thing that me and Dan would do, because we were trading London too, right? So we would watch like Malcolm in the Middle, or like different shows and stuff that we used to watch in our childhood to try and like stay up, right? It just doesn't work. It's fun, but and I had, profitable months doing that too, but it was not ideal, right? So just set yourself up for success, eliminate the distractions, put your phone on silent. Brian has a really good video on this, on how to make a custom do not disturb sort of like setup on your phone if you have an iPhone, where you only allow certain really important notifications to come through. I think that's fine too. Next on the list is making completely fresh markups every morning. And obviously that's important because if you take your old markups from the day before, it's very possible that you're going to bring the bias that you had from yesterday, which may or may not be correct, into your current day's trading, right? So you got to be very careful with that. I highly recommend marking out your structure, liquidity, supply and demand zones, stuff like that, if you're going to trade for that day. Fresh, right? Don't use the ones from yesterday. It's not a good idea. Next is setting alerts at the POIs that you want to trade, and trade your session with those minimal distractions, right? Again, you can read a book. I don't think there's any problem with that. Just make sure you have your alerts loud enough that you hear it, and don't get too engaged with the book, right? So you don't miss trades. Obviously, with setting alerts, I set them both at POIs, and if I'm within a POI, or say a POI gets swept and I want to trade the opposite direction, I start using alerts on the 1 minute, and that's where I'm really like paying attention to the market, right? Because I'm trying to figure out, I'll pull up my Notion usually and kind of weigh out my pros and cons of a trade before I enter it. That's actually the next item on the list. But I'll set alerts at zones that I actually want to enter off of, and then once it hits it, I'm ready to hit market on that trade, right? Without hesitation. So that's really important too. So moving on to the next point, journaling my trades in Notion. Again, I did a video on this. I I think I actually showed the pros and cons stuff on the last video, the GU video. So if you want to check that out, go for it. But basically what I'll do is I have a pros and cons list, basically listing out all the pros of the trade. Is it pro trend? Does it, fit the models that I want to trade? What are the cons? Is it counter trend? Is there a super liquidity that's not going to work out in my favor? Potentially, right? I'm trying to justify whether or not I can justify the risk of entering that trade. And so that's why I do that. And then I also do my in-session paper journal, which is my journal where I document all of my emotions, right? Whether or not I get into a trade. So super important. Post-session, what I'll do, right? Obviously, I'll take a break and stuff. I'm going to go eat lunch. I'll go walk the dog. I'll go work on something else. Trading is not the only thing that I do. I work on, I have a side business that I work on as well. So sometimes I'll tend to that. But what I'll do, after I've kind of taken a break from trading, a few hours later, is I'll do my daily report, which is my end of day markups. I end up, also posting them within the community under end of day markups. I usually do US 100, GU, and EU. And I'll also do my post-session paper journal entry. So it's I'll do a little review of how I feel now that the session is over. It's a few hours later, right? Then next on my list, and I think this is one that a lot of people who are learning how to trade can relate to doing, is studying, right? So go ahead and study some of the content in the course that you're in, right? If you're in phantom trading, go watch one of Brian's market commentaries. I watch them. They're great value. I learn stuff from it all the time, right? And even if I don't learn something, I end up getting reminded of stuff that I should be implementing in my trading, or it's just a good way to refresh on the strategy, right? So I'll either do that, or I'll create case studies, just for an hour. I don't want to overdo it. Some people will try to binge watch content and stuff, or back test for 6 hours at a time, which is something I've done, by the way, in the past. It's a good way to fry your brain, though. I don't think it's productive at all. It's counterproductive, in fact. You just tire yourself out. You don't actually learn anything. But that's one of the other things that I'll do is 156 tick back testing, which I'll quickly explain here. It's just going into Software FX, and instead of using the bar replay function, I'll actually play price through and let it kind of develop at a very slow rate, 156 ticks per second, right? And it usually takes me to go through an entire New York session, pretty much 10 minutes, right? So I'm actually taking my time analyzing, the market. I'm not just forcing trades for the sake of it. I'm trying to find high probability setups that fit my plan, right? And there's going to be days where I just don't even take anything because it doesn't fit my plan. And then there's going to be some days where, again, the whole point is just to basically emulate the live market as best as I can, right? I don't want to sit through an entire, 4-hour session, but if I can make it, 10 minutes and watch as these 1 minute candles develop, you actually learn a lot about how price interacts with itself. It's really interesting, right? Because we trade so much supply and demand interaction, you actually pick up a lot just from watching the 1 minute and how it develops, right? So that's another good way to do it. I consider all of that studying, really, right? Practicing backtesting doesn't matter. The next on my list is, doing some sort of exercise and, having a protein shake, right? I think it's super important to get physical exercise, right? For your mental health and obviously your physical health too, right? I think it actually helps with your trading, believe it or not. And then next on my list is reading for 30 to 60 minutes. Now, here's the thing with me, if I read during session, then, I won't really do this one. I don't necessarily finish every single thing on this list every day. I also don't work out, or go to the gym 7 days a week, right? I'm not a bodybuilder. I'll usually do it 3 to 5 times a week. Depends on, if I'm busy doing other stuff, right? Life gets busy, it happens. You try to stay as consistent as you can with it, right? Because again, there's benefits to doing all this stuff, right? I like boxing. I have a heavy bag, so sometimes I'll just hit it for 20 minutes, work up a sweat, that kind of thing. But reading for 30 to 60 minutes. Sometimes what I'll do if I'm really into a book that I'm reading, whether it's from the weekend or I was reading it, like I said, in session, I'll go ahead and actually continue to read, right? And almost count it as part of my 1 to 2 hours of relaxing if I'm really enjoying that book, right? End of day, I'll allocate 1 to 2 hours for relaxing, and that could be one of many things, right? Depends on you. Maybe you like playing, video game. Maybe you like watching a show. Sometimes I'll watch shows. I don't watch many shows nowadays. Really depends for me. I went and played like Last of Us 2. I thought it was a really good game. Spent a lot of time playing that. It took me a while because I played on like the hardest difficulty. Lately, what I've been doing, because it's the summer, I recently sold one of my motorcycles and now I bought a new one. And honestly, this one I've had to do a lot of work on, so I've been wrenching on it. It's been a lot of fun though. I don't know if you guys know what a supermoto is, but it's basically a dirt bike with street tires. So, I've been doing a lot of work to get it, working well and making it more reliable. Obviously it runs and stuff. It's fun to ride around, but I've been doing a lot more work on it than actually riding. So that's something that I've been spending my time doing at the end of the day because I enjoy it. It's a fun little hobby for me, to build like these small like mechanic skills, if you want to call it that. I'm kind of like a backyard mechanic or whatever, but fun thing to do. Do whatever you got to do. The point is, right, allocate a couple hours of time to relax, because you don't want to burn out. It's important to take a break at the end of the day. I think it is anyways, to wind down, right? Last thing on the list is being in bed at 10 p.m. right? So again, what was I talking about before at the start of the video? Getting to bed on time so you can sleep an adequate amount of hours for your body and your mind to recover. It's super important, right? Anyways, I hope you guys got something good out of this video. The whole purpose of it obviously was to give you guys some ideas to build your own list. If you're going to build your own list, I suggest starting with like maybe 3 to 5 things. Again, habits are not the easiest thing to build up. Some are easier than others, but if I had to pick, maybe one thing out of each, maybe 2 things for the first one, would be waking up on time, meditating before session. For in session, it would be journaling your trades. For post session, I would say, doing your daily end of day markups. That's extremely important. And for end of day, going to bed on time, 100%. So start small, start with a list of 4 to 5 things, and then build your habits up and see how it affects your trading. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. If you'd like to join Phantom Trading, there's a link in the description below. Shoot us a like and a subscribe if you found this video interesting. And if you have a daily process like this, let us know what yours is like in the comments below. I'm curious to see what other people do for theirs. Anyways, thanks again, guys. I will catch you in the next video.